It's April 2nd, 2020, 13 days before my birthday. And as an early indulgent treat, I pre-ordered Resident Evil 3 Remake. I've already planned my excuse to call in the next day. I've got my favorite pizza sitting beside me, and I'm excited, genuinely excited, to finally be a part of the conversation around the remake of my favorite game, Resident Evil 3. The credits roll, and suddenly the conversation I was so eager to join feels like a punch to my gut. Everywhere I look, all I hear is how much of a stinky turd this game is. And I'm sitting there emotionally distraught wondering how we got here. Because I enjoyed this game. Sure, it has its flaws. Yes, it's not the original. But is it really as bad as everyone says? Now, I've never been the type to just follow the crowd. So I went back. I replayed the original. I replayed the remake. I dug into both with the same enthusiasm I had if I just ordered a nice juicy burger. And I'm here to show you why Resident Evil 3 Remake is better than you remember, and why the conversation around it deserves a second look. Hey, I just want to interrupt today's video and let you know that this video is sponsored by nobody. So if you like this kind of content, head over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/thesupersavvy and drop me a follow. Back to the video. So why do people think Resident Evil 3 Remake is bad? Well, that's a complicated question, and it has a complicated answer. So if you stuck around this long, you deserve some honesty. Yes, the remake has its flaws, plenty of them, but the more I dig into it, the more I realize the real issue isn't just what's in the game, it's what isn't. And that trail leads straight back to its development cycle behind it. Because what worries me isn't a missing clock tower or a cut alleyway, it's the pattern. These increasingly compressed timelines, these overlapping projects, this constant pressure to deliver the next big Resident Evil title, all of it creates a pipeline where something has to give. And if this continues, it raises a real question about how Resident Evil 9 might be affected. Resident Evil 3 Remake was originally meant to launch alongside the Resident Evil 2 Remake, a kind of 1-2 revival punch of the classics. But delays hit as they do in modern development, and RE3 was pushed back to 2020. Reasonable enough, right? Until you start to look at everything happening around it. Resident Evil Village was already looming, there were 2 other remakes that were quietly entering pre-production, and Revelations 3 was stumbling towards its cancellation. Suddenly, you're starting to see the bigger picture. A studio juggling too many plates at once. But before we get lost in the industry side of things, let's zoom in on Resident Evil 3 Remake, beginning with Jill Valentine. A character is everything in a game. Their desires, their fears, the reasons they keep moving forward. All of it matters, and Resident Evil 3 is unique because it's the first time in the game series where it brings us back to a protagonist we've already played as. And even more compelling, this is the Jill only 2 months removed from the Spencer mansion. But here's the catch, we never actually see this Jill in the mansion. We never experience her trauma firsthand. Instead, we're supposed to assume the Spencer mansion incident is unchanged. But with every new iteration of a Resident Evil game, there's a little bit of retconning that is going on. So this is the beginning of the disconnect from Jill. But anyways, back to the game. We open with a brilliant POV nightmare. You're controlling someone, but you're not exactly sure who. You stumble your way into the bathroom, and then suddenly Jill appears in the mirror, zombified, suffocating under the weight of what she has survived. It's powerful, but this is that disconnect I was talking about earlier. We haven't lived this Jill's trauma. We're being shown the aftermath without the event. And yet, the moment she wakes up, you immediately understand one thing about her. She's guarded. She's a bit standoffish. Not because she's cold, but because she has to be. Jill already knows Umbrella. She knows what they're capable of, what they've already done, and what they're willing to do to bury her truth. So when Carlos bursts in, offering help with the help of a rocket launcher, her hesitation towards him isn't stubbornness, it's a survival instinct. She doesn't trust him, she doesn't trust anyone that's a part of this Umbrella team, because she can't afford to trust anyone tied to Umbrella. But that's exactly why this version of Jill works. Even though we don't know her trauma, we still know of her trauma, and the writing is good enough. Beneath the suspicion, beneath the trauma, she still chooses to help. That's the Jill that we know. She throws herself in the chaos of Raccoon City, not for the glory, not only for revenge, but because there are civilians out there who don't stand a chance without her. She's exhausted, she's paranoid, she's traumatized. but she still does the right thing. That's not heroism, that's resilience. And once the story snaps into motion, all of that emotional weight gets pushed aside, because from that moment on, there's only one thing that matters: Jill's survival. And then there's Nemesis. This name alone carries weight. Even the people who have never played a Resident Evil game know who Nemesis is. He's the iconic pursuer, the unstoppable force, the face of Resident Evil 3. He's the reason the original game carved out its own identity, instead of just being an RE2 clone. And I'll be blunt, Capcom dropped the ball here. In the original, Nemesis wasn't just a monster, he was a system. He was a design philosophy. He was the embodiment of unpredictability. You could choose when to fight him, you could choose when to run from him. You planned your route around him. Would you gamble a risky encounter for a weapon upgrade? He existed outside of the script, and that's what made him terrifying. Every corner was a question. Is he going to be here? Am I ready? Do I even have a choice? In the remake, Nemesis becomes a set piece. He's a spectacle. He's just a roller coaster of scripted chases and boss fights, including one that gets reused. Instead of being a dynamic threat woven into the fabric of the game, he's just a series of cutscenes and quick-time moments stitched together to look like tension. But the real tragedy of it is, you can feel the potential. The design team clearly wanted him to be the cinematic showstopper, but in the process, they stripped away the very thing that made him iconic: agency. Your agency. See, when you're playing the original, Nemesis wouldn't just appear in a cutscene. As soon as the camera would change, you'd hear the door open, the music change, and one thing. And then you had to choose one of those questions you just asked yourself. It created an environment that you were never safe no matter your choice. Even if you beat him and you got a weapon upgrade, you never felt comfortable because you knew he'd come back. And all of that's missing in the remake. There's no sugarcoating it. Nemesis is a downgrade. Not because he looks bad or because the boss fights are inherently awful, but because he's no longer Nemesis. He's just a theme park attraction wearing a Nemesis skin. And that stings, because when you take a character as iconic as Nemesis and reduce him to a scripted attraction, it just doesn't affect the monster. It affects the entire structure of a game. When Nemesis stops becoming dynamic, the world around him stops feeling dynamic too. And that leads directly into one of the remake's persistent criticisms: its linearity. One of the biggest criticisms that the remake faces is its linear nature. Every playthrough is the exact same. But here's the thing. The original Resident Evil 3 wasn't exactly a sprawling open world either. It just felt like it was. You still see most of the same locations in both versions. The remake just presents them in a more concise and a more focused way. The original Resident Evil 3 gave players the illusion of choice. Fight the monster or run. Push him off the bridge or jump yourself. Take one route through the city or another. These weren't really branching paths. They were just clever workarounds that made the game feel bigger than what it was. If you wanted to run without a menu prompt, you relied on an infamous dodge mechanic that no one could ever land consistently. If you wanted a dramatic leap, you couldn't do it. The PlayStation couldn't handle a dynamic QuickTime event system, so the game kind of faked it with a menu box. These choices didn't change the story. They didn't alter the ending. They didn't create alternate timelines. What they did do was to make the game feel more reactive, like the world was acknowledging your decisions even if the destination was always the same. And sure, I'll be the first to admit that there is something charming about that. Seeing a different cutscene, triggering a slightly different encounter, those touches gave the original some personality. But once you've seen them, they're done. The game ultimately funnels you down the same path with the same outcome, every single time. There's only one ending, and the choice that influences the final cutscene is more of a cosmetic tweak than its own ending. The remake removes those illusions, but it also expands in other areas. And despite all the discourse, both versions clock in roughly the same playtime. People praise Remake 2 endlessly, but that game cut out fundamental chunks of the original, and no one seems to mind because that remake came out first. I would argue without a zapping system and a fully fledged Scenario B and the two scenarios interacting with each other, that's more detrimental to a remake than a cut clock tower. Is the remake perfect? No. corners were cut. Some areas deserve some more time in the oven. But Capcom clearly prioritized its pacing, your urgency, and immersion. They wanted to give you the experience to feel like a desperate sprint through a dying city, not a guided tour of Raccoon's greatest hits. But here's the twist. While some systems were streamlined or stripped back, one area where the remake genuinely shines is its supporting cast. If the gameplay is tighter and the structure is more focused, the characters around Jill are where the remake actually expands, deepens, and improves. And that starts with one of the biggest surprises of the entire game, its side characters. Let's start with Carlos. Both of his versions work, and that's rare when you're dealing with a remake. The original Carlos was charming in that late 90s over-the-top action hero kind of way, a little cheesy, a lot of flirty, but undeniably likable. The remake keeps his likability but grounds him. This Carlos is confident but not invincible. Sure, he's a soldier, but he's never seen anything like this outbreak, and it shows in the way he reacts, hesitates, and pushes through his fear. And his opening line, it's instantly iconic. It tells you everything you need to know about him in 5 seconds. He's charismatic, capable, but not above cracking a joke in the middle of hell. His dynamic with Jill is one of the remake's biggest wins. She starts off cold towards him. She's dismissive. But they're two people forced together by circumstance. And by the final act, they're a genuine team. Not a forced romance, not a cliche partnership, but two survivors who trust each other enough to risk their lives without hesitation. It's subtle and it's earned. Mikhail is such a massive improvement in the remake. In the original, he was memorable, but he was brief. He was a character defined mostly by his injuries and his sacrifice. In the remake, he has presence. He has his authority. He feels like an actual captain trying to hold together a squad of exhausted mercenaries in a collapsing city. The tension between him and Nikolai is off the charts. It's what grounds the game. You can feel the strain of his leadership, the frustration of watching his team die and fall apart, and the quiet desperation of a man who knows he's running out of time. His final line hits harder because the game gives you enough time to understand why he makes that choice. It's not just a heroic moment, it's his character arc coming full circle in just a short period.
Get off my train, shit Sparta!
Nikolai is a complicated character for me. The performance is fantastic. He's cold, calculating, almost reptilian, but the writing always doesn't keep up with him. His motivation is money, yet by the game's end, he destroys the very thing that would make him the most money, and then he dies without the game fully exploring the contradiction. There's something compelling there, a man so committed to self-preservation that he sabotages his own goals. But it feels off. He feels like a character that needed another rewrite, one more scene, one more final moment of clarity to become truly iconic. He's memorable, but he's not fully realized. And that focus on refinement doesn't just stop at the narrative, it carries it straight into the gameplay itself. Because for all the debates about cut content or linear gameplay, simply put, Resident Evil 3 Remake simply plays amazing. Resident Evil 3 Remake is a refined, more aggressive evolution of Resident Evil 2 Remake's foundation. It takes the tight, methodical survival horror loop of Resident Evil 2 and shifts it towards something more faster, more fluid, more action-leaning, without fully abandoning the series' roots. Some choices are questionable, of course. Removing the defensive items feels strange when you come straight from Resident Evil 2 Remake, where a single knife or grenade could save your life. Here you feel more exposed, more vulnerable, and at first it feels like a step backward. But then the dodge mechanic kicks in, and suddenly it all makes sense. The dodge isn't just a button, it's a statement. It gives the player and Jill more agency and more control. It's more mobility and honestly, it's more personality in combat, and turns encounters into these quick reactive bursts of decision making. Perfect dodging a zombie grab or slipping past a hunter's swipe feels incredible, and it reinforces Jill's identity as someone who's not just surviving the outbreak, she's outmaneuvering it. The weapons feel good too. They're punchy and responsive, satisfying in that classic Resident Evil way. And the enemy roster? It's strong, despite its reused assets. The Hunter Gammas are pure nightmare fuel. These grotesque ambush predators that can end your run in a single gulp. Meanwhile, the original hunters in the hospital are the best designed in the entire franchise. They're fast and lethal and capable of instant kills that keep you on edge. The enemies of this game are the type that force you to respect a room before you even step foot into it. And that leads me to the overall feeling that I have about the gameplay. It just feels good to play. Every run is fun. Every encounter is snappy. The pacing is tight, the combat is responsive, and the movement has that confident rhythm that makes replaying the game genuinely addictive. It's the kind of design where even if you know exactly what's coming, you still enjoy the process of getting there. And with the dodge, you just have to remember those 5 simple rules.
5 D's of dodgeball. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge.
Resident Evil 3 Remake was never going to sweep at the Game of the Year awards, but it also didn't deserve the treatment that it got. Its flaws aren't really about the game itself, they're symptoms of something bigger. Capcom has slowly turned Resident Evil into this dependable assembly line car wash franchise, with consistent output, segmented development, and projects that sometimes feel like they're pushed out the door before they're fully ready. Resident Evil 3 Remake is the clearest example of this. It was originally meant to ship alongside Resident Evil 2 Remake, but development issues forced it into a standalone release. Should it have launched at $60? Probably not. But it's worth more than $30, and honestly I'd argue $40 or $50 is fair for a game that I replay more than Resident Evil 2 Remake and even 4 Remake. In a weird way, that messy development cycle accidentally captured the spirit of the original Resident Evil 3 development cycle, and delivered us a fast, replayable, chaotic, and fun game. It's not perfect, but it's far from a disaster, and it's a solid entry that keeps pulling me back. It deserves to sit on the shelf next to its peers without the constant criticism. Because if we're not going to criticize Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 4 Remake for cutting some foundational content, why are we doing that to Resident Evil 3 Remake? But here's the part that matters. The problems that shaped Resident Evil 3 Remake didn't end with Resident Evil 3 Remake. They're part of a pattern in how Capcom is handling the series today. Shorter development windows, split teams, reused pipelines, and a growing pressure to keep the franchise in constant rotation. And if that pattern continues, Resident Evil 9 might be heading into the same trap. And that's what I want to break down next. So if you like this video, do me a huge favor. Like, comment, and subscribe, and most importantly, share with a friend. Take care.